Men today protect their peace the way women once protected their purity. That might sound shocking at first. But stay with me, because this shift is not just about dating, or intimacy, or marriage. It is about the way men now see themselves, their lives, and the price they are no longer willing to pay. For centuries, a woman's innocence was guarded as the most valuable possession. Families, churches, and entire cultures built rules around it. Men were expected to pursue it, and women were expected to defend it. Purity was not just personal. It was symbolic. It carried weight, value, honor. Today, something similar has happened, but in reverse. It is not innocence. It is not modesty. It is peace. Men, especially men in their 40s and 50s, men who have lived through marriages, divorces, family court struggles, financial loss, and the endless cycle of arguments at home, to have come to understand that peace is more valuable than anything else. Peace is no longer a luxury. Peace is survival. Imagine a man in suburban America. He works long hours, carries the weight of his household, tries to keep up with the rising cost of everything. He drives home at the end of the day, exhausted, hoping for rest. But what waits for him? A partner ready to argue, ready to compare him to someone else, ready to find fault. Maybe it starts small, a question about the bill, a complaint about his tone, a criticism about how he failed to notice something. Soon, the house that should feel like refuge turns into a battlefield. This is the moment when men begin to see peace differently. It is no longer background noise. It is the air they breathe. And once a man has experienced genuine peace, even for a short time, he refuses to give it up again. Younger men often don't see this yet. They trade their peace for drama, for attention, for the thrill of intimacy, or the validation of being chosen by a woman. They convince themselves that the stress, the arguments, the sleepless nights are normal, that love is supposed to hurt. But men who are older, who have lived long enough, I see through this lie. They know that love built on chaos destroys more than it gives. And so men begin to withdraw. Not because they dislike women, not because they are bitter, but because they have learned, through pain, that their peace is priceless. Think about what happens in a courtroom during a divorce. A man stands there, hands shaking as the lawyer reads out the settlement. He hears the words half of his savings, half of his home, sometimes even limited time with his children, years of work erased in minutes. He looks at the woman he once loved, and she is now his opponent. The judge does not care about his exhaustion, his loyalty, or his sacrifices. The system strips him of peace. And in that moment he understands something no one taught him when he was young. Peace is the foundation of a man's life. Without it, his career crumbles. Without it, his health declines. Without it, his mind turns against him. Peace is the oxygen. And once a man has suffocated, once he has struggled to breathe under the weight of conflict, he never forgets how much oxygen matters. This is why, today, more and more men are choosing solitude over marriage. This is why they walk away from relationships that threaten their sanity. They would rather drink coffee alone on a quiet porch than sit across from someone who turns every meal into an argument. They would rather live in a smaller house with silence than in a big one filled with chaos. And here is the part that matters most. Just as women once built their identity around guarding their innocence, men are now building their identity around guarding their peace. It is no longer negotiable. It is not something they are willing to trade, even for love, even for intimacy. This is not just a personal story. It is a cultural shift. It is reshaping how men date, how they marry, and how they raise families. And if you think this doesn't matter, ask yourself why marriage rates in America continue to decline, why birth rates are falling, why entire generations of men say they would rather stay single than risk losing themselves. The promise that marriage will automatically bring happiness has been exposed for many men. They have seen too many brothers, friends, co-workers lose everything. They have lived through their own storms. And now, they refuse to walk into the same fire again. So when you hear a man say, "I value my peace," understand what he means. He is not being dramatic. He is not exaggerating. He is telling you that he has lived the cost of losing it. And he is warning anyone who will listen that once peace is gone, the man himself is gone too. Stay with me, because in the next part, we will go deeper into why this shift is happening, what it reveals about modern women, and why men have made peace their most guarded treasure. When a man is young, he rarely understands the weight of peace. At 20, or even 30, he still believes that excitement, passion, and desire are worth the cost of constant conflict. He convinces himself that sleepless nights, jealous fights, and the endless chase are simply the price of love. In his mind, the noise is proof of something real. If it doesn't hurt, it must not be love. But time is a brutal teacher. As the years pass, men learn that the chaos does not fade. The arguments do not stop. The cost only grows heavier. And slowly, the thrill they once sought becomes poison. What once felt like romance becomes exhaustion. What once made them feel alive now leaves them drained. This is the shift that divides young men from older men. The young are still blinded by the illusion that chaos is love. The older know better. They know that real strength is not found in how much chaos a man can survive, but in how firmly he can protect his peace. Picture a man in his late 40s. He has been through a divorce. He has lost weekends with his children, handed over a portion of his retirement account, and lived in an apartment smaller than the garage of the home he used to own. He remembers lying awake in that apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. That sound was not loneliness. It was freedom. It was peace. From that moment on, he swore to himself that no woman, no relationship, no promise of love would ever drag him back into chaos. He discovered something young men rarely see until it is too late. Peace is not emptiness. Peace is power. Now, let us turn to the other side. The reality of the modern woman. In the past, a woman's value in society was tied to her modesty, her loyalty, and her ability to build a home. Today, those expectations have shifted. Women now live in a culture that rewards attention, celebrates independence, and encourages them to explore without limits. On the surface, this sounds like progress, and in many ways, it is. But beneath that progress lies a cost. Social media has created an economy of validation. A woman can receive more attention from strangers in a single day than her grandmother did in an entire lifetime. A picture posted online, a short video, as a few words, and suddenly, a flood of likes and comments tell her she is special, unique, desired. This constant stream of attention is addictive. It changes how she sees herself, how she sees men, how she sees relationships. Now imagine being the man who has to compete with that. A man who comes home from work to a wife who spends more time scrolling through her phone than looking into his eyes. A man who plans a dinner, only to watch her upload photos for validation from people who don't even know her. Slowly, he realizes he is no longer her partner. He is her audience. The modern man is forced into a role he never asked for. He is not a husband. He is not even a companion. He is a stagehand in her performance, a provider of resources, while the real connection she seeks comes from an endless crowd of strangers. Add to this the issue of past relationships. The polite term for a woman's history, once dismissed as an outdated concern, it now lingers in the minds of men who struggle to bond deeply with women who have shared themselves too freely. It is not simply jealousy. It is biology. A man senses that something sacred has been spread thin, and that the bond he hopes to form will always compete with ghosts from her past. And then there is the conflict itself. Modern relationships are no longer quiet partnerships. They are negotiations of power. Who decides? Who leads? Who sacrifices? In too many homes, these negotiations turn into constant battles. A man walks through the door at the end of a long day, hoping for rest. Instead, he finds himself in another war zone. Questions, complaints, criticism. The home becomes an arena. The peace he longed for disappears before he can even take off his shoes. This is why so many men now hesitate to marry. This is why the dating market feels empty. Why men retreat into solitude, hobbies, or even virtual worlds. They are not cowards. They are not broken. They are defending themselves. They are guarding something they once gave away too cheaply. To lose peace is not just to suffer. It is to collapse. Without peace, a man cannot focus. Without peace, his career stalls. Without peace, his health withers. The heart races. The mind spins. The body ages faster than it should. Stress destroys health. And in America today, stress is written into too many marriages. Think again of the man in his 50s, sitting at a kitchen table with bills scattered in front of him. His wife demands more. More vacations. More remodeling. More attention. He feels the walls closing in. His paycheck is not enough. His time is not enough. His very being is not enough. He looks at her. But he does not see the girl he once fell in love with. He sees a judge, a critic, an accuser, and slowly, he realizes that the cost of staying is greater than the cost of leaving. So he leaves. He walks away. Not with joy, but with clarity. 'Cause he has learned that the only way to live is to guard his peace, the way past generations guarded their most sacred possessions. This is not a trend among a few men. It is becoming a cultural wave. Marriage rates fall. Birth rates decline. Men delay commitment, or reject it entirely. Society calls them selfish, immature, afraid. But the truth is simpler. Men are not afraid of love. They are afraid of losing themselves. To understand this, you must see the truth clearly. A man can live without intimacy. He can live without marriage. He can live without children. But he cannot live without peace. And so he guards it. With silence. With solitude. With refusal. Just as women once said no to protect what was sacred to them. Men now say no to protect what is sacred to them. The words have changed. The culture has changed. But the instinct is the same. Peace has become the new purity. And men will not give it up easily. The turning point comes in the silence of a courtroom. A man stands there. His suit pressed. Tie tight. But his hands shake as the judge reads the settlement. Half of his retirement. Half of his savings. His home. His car. In some cases, even limited custody of his children. He listens in disbelief. Though he has heard stories like this before. Stories of co-workers, neighbors, brothers, stories he once thought would never happen to him. Now it is his reality. In that moment, he learns what no one taught him when he was young. Love may fade. Intimacy may disappoint. Money may come and go. But peace, once stolen, is almost impossible to get back. The court doesn't just take his assets. It takes his calm. It replaces his nights with insomnia. His mornings with anxiety, his days with a constant ache of betrayal. This is the climax of the modern man's story, not the wedding day with its promises, not the honeymoon with its joy, but the courtroom, where vows dissolve into paperwork, and where he realizes that the greatest mistake he ever made was not protecting his peace. He walks out of that courthouse different, older, wiser, harder. From that day forward, he looks at relationships with new eyes. He understands that the next time he gives up his peace could be the last time he ever feels whole. And so, he swears to himself never again. For some men, this vow means solitude. They buy smaller homes, keep simple routines, and find comfort in the quiet hum of their own space. For others, it means strict boundaries. No marriage, no cohabitation. No risk that someone can step into their life and dismantle it through a legal system tilted against them. Critics call this bitterness. They call it fear. They say men are weak, afraid of commitment, unwilling to grow. But that judgment ignores the truth. It is not fear that drives a man to guard his peace. It is wisdom. It is survival. Think of it this way. A man can work 60 hours a week, run a business, face endless stress from the outside world. If he returns home to peace, he can endure it all. But if he returns home to chaos, if his house becomes another battlefield, his spirit begins to collapse. He has no refuge. He has nowhere to heal. And a man who cannot heal will eventually break. This is why men protect their peace so fiercely now. Because they have seen what happens when it is gone. They have lost friends who could not continue with life after losing everything in divorce. They have visited brothers in hospital beds with stress-induced heart conditions. They have comforted fathers who no longer see their children. And each time, they are reminded that peace is not optional. It is sacred. So, the resolution is clear. Men are not waiting for society to understand. They are not begging for women to change. They are not hoping that laws will suddenly become fair. They are acting for themselves. They are guarding their lives by guarding their peace. Picture a man in his 50s sitting on the porch of a modest house. The sun is rising. A cup of coffee steams in his hand. His phone is turned off. The silence is heavy. But it is not empty. It is rich. It is calm. He does not feel lonely. He feels free. This is not the image most people expect when they hear the word success. Success, we are told, is a big house, a wife, children, vacations, photos on the wall. But more and more men are redefining success. For them, success is not measured in what they own, but in what they no longer endure. Success is the absence of constant conflict. Success is waking up without dread. Success is peace. And here is the truth society does not want to admit. Just as women once built entire cultures around protecting their purity, men are now building new ways of living around protecting their peace. This shift will reshape families, relationships, even the future of nations. Lower marriage rates, declining birth rates, a generation of men who say no, not out of hate, but out of self-preservation. So, what should we learn from this? The lesson is not that men should hide forever, or that women are enemies. The lesson is that peace is the non-negotiable foundation of a man's life. Without it, nothing else matters. Without it, no relationship can survive. Without it, a man loses himself. And if society truly wants strong families, lasting marriages, and healthy men, it must start by respecting this truth. Peace cannot be dismissed as selfishness. It cannot be mocked as weakness. It must be honored as sacred. Because the modern man has already made his choice. He will guard his peace with the same intensity, the same devotion, the same seriousness that women once guarded their purity. And he will not apologize for it. So when you hear men speak of solitude, when you see them retreat from marriage, when you notice them walking away from relationships, remember this: they are not abandoning love. They are not rejecting connection. They are protecting their survival. Peace is their new purity. Peace is their shield. Peace is their final vow. And once a man has lived without it, he will never surrender it again.